Hey my friends, it's your girl Tisha popping by with yet another Tisha-ism and midlife makeover moment. I just wanted to take some time to process either or and both. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about how someone can be very successful in one area of their life and a complete failure in a different area. And even oftentimes in families, depending on where we fit in the family dynamic, we can experience someone very different depending on where we are. So this conversation was about a family rift between two brothers. But actually the rift was about their mother. And oftentimes, when we're parenting, I myself was a teen mom. I only have one child, so there's not going to be a rift between siblings. However, oftentimes when there's an older sibling and a younger sibling, they experience the parent differently. And in that doing, they experience each other differently. At times, the older child, depending on where they are or whatever their life circumstance is, can become the surrogate parent to the younger one. I'm not going to make a judgment about whether or not that's fair, whether it's right, what's happening, whatever. We've all had it, right? But oftentimes, right, when you become a parent by circumstance rather than a parent by choice, break it down. I was a teen mom. I didn't really choose necessarily to be a parent. It just was a result of my circumstance. Versus later in life, I wanted to be a parent and that didn't happen. That often happens in families where there is a gap between an older sibling and a younger sibling. Well, depending on where the parent is, especially if this is the case where there's a single parent or a parent that is dealing with some dysfunction with their spouse or their significant other, that older child can become the surrogate parent. And the older child loses out, for the most part, on their childhood because the parent becomes over-reliant on that older child. Not making a judgment about whether it's right or it's wrong or the circumstance. I'm just speaking about what is. So don't be coming back to me with your attitude about how you disagree, which you can, but I'm not accusing anybody. So because of where they are in that space, they experience their parent differently. So the older child felt like their parent was more like a sibling, or they're having to step into a role as surrogate parent when they're not necessarily mature enough or parented enough to be able to step in that role. But because the parent is in need of help because they can't manage or maintain, or they're in a space where they need help, that's what they have to do. Whereas the older child can start to be resentful to the younger one who gets to just be a kid. And so as they get older, they have a different experience with their parents. So the older child is like, I'm not dealing with mama no more. I'm not taking care of no more of her issues. I'm not picking up the pieces. I'm not. And the younger child's like, yeah, but that's your mom. And you're supposed to help. And the older child's like, no, I've done all the helping I'm going to do in this situation. You need to figure it out. And so then that's where the rift comes, because siblings are looking at this situation from a different perspective. Is it right or is it wrong? It's either and. But oftentimes, because parents, and I'm not putting the blame on all of them, are living in their own shame story, they're not even willing to acknowledge that there's a hint of truth to their different experiences of a parent. And so some triangulation happens, and that's how dysfunctional cycles happen in families. So in that same day, we were having a different conversation with her children who also have older siblings. And this is kind of how I put it all together, right? So the younger siblings got parenting from their father, who was a circumstantial father for the older children, but a chosen father to them. So he had some children in his younger years, right? And those relationships with the mother they weren't healthy, let's just say. And so as a result, the older children felt like their father wasn't around. He didn't provide for them what they needed him to provide. I don't know if it was, it could be financial, it could be emotional, it could be all of those things, but they didn't feel like they were getting what they deserved. The younger children got their father by choice. That means he wanted those kids. He wanted that family. At that time, he was ready to be a present and engaged father. What's happened, though, is the older kids are resentful towards the younger ones because they feel like the younger kids got what their dad didn't give them. And so they mad at the younger kids. And the younger kids are like, I ain't gonna let you talk bad about my dad because my dad been doing that, being there for me, being all of that. Same situation where you have two sets of children who have experienced a parental figure differently. And as a result of that, because there's some miscommunication or there's no room for that, or maybe there's not a respectful way to communicate what you didn't get, or maybe there's some healing that has to take place on all parties. Oftentimes, a rift in a family has to do with the fact that people experience someone in their life differently. So now let's talk about evolution. We sometimes want to hold that parent, that sibling, that situation to a standard from before, right? Perhaps your parent has evolved. Perhaps your parent really was a really bad parent to the older children just because they had their own stuff. They had their own trauma. They had their own issues. They had their own stuff going on. And they had this rift in the relationship. But that parent also has the opportunity to evolve, to learn from the things that they messed up on, to learn from their past mistakes, to maybe do some healing work on their own. And then they pour all that healing work into the younger child, the younger spouse. But the older ones are like, but hold on a minute, what about me? You came in here, you didn't do your job, you didn't hold your word, you didn't allow space for trust, there wasn't no space for respect in here, and then you just like kind of dropping me like a bad habit, leaving me with all of these emotions while you going on to live your own happy life. What do you do in that situation? How do you reconcile it? How do you handle those dynamics of that family? I heard it once said that every family has its own lesson to learn. So what's the lesson? The lesson, in my opinion, is it can be both. It can be either or. Does the family dynamic, however, allow for both? Allow for space for both? Can a teenage parent be able to build a relationship with their older child while also still being a good parent to the younger one? Is there a space for that conversation for healing and growth? Not if there's shame. Not if there are people who don't want to apologize. Not if there are people who can't listen, who can't hold the space for the broken heart, oftentimes, for the older child. It's not necessarily jealousy or envy. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it is just a broken heart. And oftentimes we want a parent to already apologize for what was a tumultuous situation to begin with. Now think about it. As a teen parent, especially from the male's perspective, and you have a very tumultuous relationship with the child's mother, you already had to live through all the hell of that. And then now you got to live with the hell of having to deal with a child who resents you too. Wow. That's heavy. And then you're getting older. And then people start talking about who's going to take care of who. Daddy's getting older. Who's going to take care of daddy? Who's going to write this check? Who's going to come by and see him? Who's going to go look after him? Who's going to do? And that's when things start to break down. So, I'm not a therapist. I'm not telling you what you should or you shouldn't do. I am, however, very, very clear that life can be both. You could have been a terrible parent to your older child and been a wonderful parent to your younger child, or children, or siblings, or whatever that is. Neither of those things are wrong. They just are. But the strength of the family is really in the strength of the leaders. So, if there's a rift of some sort, there's nothing you can do to go and replay what's happened in the past. But you can work to facilitate some healing. You can work on acknowledging maybe where you went wrong. Maybe you can acknowledge that, your older child lost their childhood sooner than maybe they should have. And while you can't go back and fix that, you can acknowledge it and recognize that there's going to be some emotional fallout that comes from that. But oftentimes, as adults, we haven't healed enough to be able to make that happen. I heard Dr. Anita Phillips say that one of the greatest gifts that you can give your children is the gift of an apology. Oftentimes, it's just that, a sincere, heartfelt apology that says, hey, I can't go back and change what happened in the past, but what can we do about it right now? But everybody's not conscious enough to do that. So, if you are an older child, it really comes down to recognizing what it is and deciding if you're going to allow that damage or what you felt like you didn't get to spill over into your other relationships. That's number one. As a parent, you have the ability to go back and apologize and really, really hold space for the heartbreak. Literally, parents, you need to understand you broke your children's heart and you were the first one to do it. And you were the one that was the most impactful. And oftentimes, older children feel like if my parent will break my heart, who else is going to do it? Can I trust anybody else? Can anybody else respect and hold the space for me? If the one person who was there to hold the space for me, to carry and love me, couldn't do it, who else can? Younger children, if you're the youngest one, hold some space for your older siblings, because the relationship that you had with your parent is not the same relationship that they had. And it's okay for two people to experience that same person differently. Weigh in. Let's talk about family dynamics. Can it be either or? Was it you? Were you the older parent? Were you the parent that treated your older child differently than your younger child? Did you treat your older child like your surrogate spouse rather than your child? Did you treat your older parent like your younger child's nanny or caregiver rather than your child? Did you put more responsibility on your older child than what was necessary? And if you did that, are you in defense mode? I did what I had to do. It was better than what I had. I ain't gonna make no apologies for what I had to do to take care of you. You can do that, but you're missing an opportunity, not just for healing for your older child, but for healing for your younger one too. And also being able to reconcile a family dynamic. That's why we have fragmented families, because we're not in our truth. We're not telling the truth about what we've experienced. And also, we can do it without shame or blame. It may never happen. I'm just throwing it out there because I noticed a pattern. I've seen this pattern in many families of many people that I have been close to. Experiences of your parents are different. They're human beings, but one's experience is not negated by the other. Like, share, and comment. Chime in. I want to hear. Did you have that happen? And what did you do? How have you reconciled it? Are you in relationship with your siblings? Are you in relationship with your parents? Are you feeling like you're having to keep the peace and hold the line? It's your girl Tisha. Like, share, and comment. I'll talk to you soon, my friends.